Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, one of the world's biggest spammers gets profiled, but the technical details on how he pulls this whole thing off are fascinating. And now the tech press is completely consumed by new Apple malware. But the real story is in why iOS trusts the malware in the first place. Then it's a great big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 187 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on November 6th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, DigitalOcean, Ting, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream, why, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You should probably go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody.
Hey, Alan, how are you feeling? You sound a little sick.
I'm actually pretty good. At BVSD on the later days, I had a sore throat, but I'm back to normal now.
I hear a little difference in your voice, and I think the reason why it stands out to me is because in the 187-week run of TechSNAP, I don't think you've ever been sick.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
It's all Michael Dexter's fault. He has little kids, and they give him a cold, and he brought it to the conference.
I know all about that.
Chris Moore got it as well, and
now Chris is going to take it to his kids, and then his kids are going to spread it to whole school.
Or his kids are going to refine it into like a super virus that's like immune to all.
So what you're saying is BSD now, one of you is going to be sick for like the next 3 weeks.
No. I'll fight it off. I'll be fine.
All right. So how was Meet BSD? You just got back
great.
Yesterday?
Yep. I got back last night after midnight. So technically I get back today.
You are a trooper, man, for being here today.
Yeah.
You rock. So how was it? I saw IX Systems has a whole bunch of photos up on their G+ and Facebook page.
Yeah, they took like 80 or 90 photos, and there's a lot more photos that haven't been combined yet. Those are just the ones that the IX marketing team took at the conference.
And I was following along as you guys were going.
I think my favorite event, they only have one or two pictures from IX, but other people have many more pictures, was they did a demonstration on the survivability of a pair of TrueNASs in a high availability setup.
Really?
FreeNASs. Just they had two FreeNAS minis hooked up in a high availability setup, and then volunteers from the audience would come up, remove one hard drive from the array that they were actually using to do a build world on. So it was actually being used.
Okay.
They pull the drive, take the drive carrier off because those are hard to get. Take the hard drive and choose one of many tools on the table to destroy the hard drive.
This is a hell of a demonstration.
Picture of Powell, the guy that ported ZFS to FreeBSD, and that was this week's episode of BSD Now, smashing a hard drive with a hammer. Almost everybody chose the hammer. Nobody.
Really?
Well, the hacksaw was probably just going to make a mess on the carpet.
Yeah.
And they tried, but the Tesla coil was not working very good.
The Tesla coil.
But yeah, quite a few people got to take a hammer to a hard drive. And it was funny because somebody took a picture of Kirk McKusick doing it. He's the guy that invented or wrote UFS, the file system that FreeBSD and OpenBSD.
Oh,
and
that little thing?
Uses.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And somebody got a picture of him smashing a hard drive with a hammer and tweeted about it. It's like, Kirk tries out hammer FS.
Oh, ouch. Too
but
punny.
Also, after he smashed the hard drive, he's like, I've always wanted to do that. Because, he's been working with unreliable hard drives, losing data and corrupting his great file system for years. And this is the first time he got to smash a hard drive with a hammer.
I noticed a lot of Groff appearances.
Yes, Groff stayed on the podium for like the whole 2 days. And there was also the handoff. Hiroki Saito from Asia, who's the organizer of Asia BSDCon, took Groff home with him. So Sean handed off the Twitter account and stuff. So we'll see if we get some interesting tweets from Hiroki.
And I see you did a lightning talk.
Yes, I gave a short lightning talk on getting rid of all the old-fashioned Unix config files, specifically ones where each tool has its own unique config file that's not like any other config file, and replacing that with one common format that's easier to work with and can be edited automatically with command line tools.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Is that a thing that's going to happen?
That involves me writing said command line tools and converting the utilities to read this format.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and extending libucl, the universal config language library, to support more of the functionality I need to write the tools and all that. And yes, if you read my slides, specifically, I didn't want the common format to be XML, and that's why I'm inventing the tools now instead of leaving it up to someone else who might decide to use XML.
Thank you. You know what, Alan? Thank you. Exactly. Honestly, I was thinking, is this XML?
Specifically, this is designed to be human writable. So it's kind of based on JSON, but with a lot of the pickiness taken out. So like it's not going to stop working because you put a comma after the last item in an array, which JSON would. And also, JSON doesn't support inline comments, and UCL does.
Wow. Wow. This is amazing. This is a thing you're working on right now?
Yes. It's one of the things. I had to learn C to be able to do it, but I'm doing it.
You went ahead and taught yourself that? That's good.
Well, I wouldn't say I taught myself that. I just started brute forcing it, and I read a lot of man pages.
Okay. That's how I would do it too.
The FreeBSD man pages cover every C function that's built into libc. So you can actually like look up stir2ul and find out what it does.
So
and the parameters and stuff. And this actually was very helpful.
We should put a link, because you have it up on Google Docs. We should put a link to your talk.
Sure. And MeetBSD, the conference, the first 2 days, the Saturday and Sunday, were videoed and will be up soon. And they've been collecting all the slides. So the MeetBSD website on the agenda, they will have links to all the slides of everybody's talks.
That's awesome.
For BSD Now, we also managed to record 2 interviews with 2 of the people that gave interesting talks there. We tried to get more, but everybody was so busy at the Dev Summit actually working on stuff that they didn't have time for interviews. Yeah. But we got David Maxwell talking about a new utility called PipeCut, which is an interactive editor for writing command lines, trees with pipes in them. So like, if you've ever worked with the Unix command line, you've probably come across the cool shortcut of you have some file with data in or whatever, and you want to find out how often some of the data is repeated or whatever. For example, you grep a log file and find all the IPs that have failed to log in on your SSH.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you can use awk or something to select just the IP address section of that line.
Yeah.
So then you just get a list of IP addresses, one per line. But you want to find out which of these are just one try and which one is like some Chinese IP that's been attacking you 100 times.
Right.
So then you'd pipe that into like sort, and then unique minus C, and then pipe that into sort again, like minus RN, and then you get a list of the IPs that have repeated in the list the most times. But it's like, how did you learn that? Everybody just kind of heard that from somebody else or saw it somewhere else.
Very true.
So PipeCut allows you to actually interactively like edit and construct these and be able to scroll back and forth through your pipe, they call them blades, and see what's going on and see what the output looks like in each one so that you can construct more complicated pipes. And it has like a regex mode, look ahead mode. So like if you're on the thing and you're on the blade that's doing the grep, it shows you in highlighting what is which stuff is matching your regular expression.
That is
so it can help you interactively write a regular expression, and it's a terminal tool, so you can do it all over like SSH.
Oh, this is nice. This is nice.
When you see the video of it, it's going to be amazing. The website's not up yet, but it will be soon. And then it's a BSD licensed open source tool. It'll work on every OS.
Oh man, will you make sure to let me know when that's up?
Yeah, it's also just a great teaching tool for teaching people how cool pipes and Unix are.
Yeah. Which is
like, if you remember, we showed a video on TechSNAP like 3-4 months ago from the old AT&T labs about using a series of pipes on an email to do the spell check. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
It took an email and then broke it down to every word and then sorted them, uniqued them, and then piped it through a spell check.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, but it kind of just shows what the stuff you can do.
Yeah, I think when people that have been administrators of Windows systems for a long time come over to a Linux or a Unix system, that area is really unique compared to Windows. And
well, not necessarily, because I actually have the GNU Win32 tools installed on my Windows box.
But like
the Windows command line does support pipes.
Yeah, like you'll pipe out like something to a text file or something like that. But that doesn't.
But I actually have grep and the GNU sort and awk and sed stuff installed on my Windows machine.
But the chain you can build, like on a Linux box or on a Unix box, it's so much cooler than the stuff you can do on
the other one, which will be great when you're watching it, was Brendan Gregg, who's the guy that wrote the book on dtrace.
Yeah.
And is a performance guy at Netflix now.
Yeah.
Well, he was giving a live demo, and then as he was writing some pipes, people were like shouting stuff at him, and he's like, I know, and he's writing this like he wrote a new dtrace thing live during the thing based on something somebody shouted out. It was really cool.
You know, it's sort of
and
remarkable.
So that was actually our second interview was with Brendan Gregg about benchmarking. Guy. Yeah, about benchmarking, why people do benchmarks wrong, how to do them right.
Do you have that? When you talk to these guys, you're like, wow, you're the guy that wrote dtrace. Like, I don't think he didn't write all of dtrace, but he also did write part of ZFS. He's actually, from my understanding, responsible for most of the L2ARC code, the SSD cache that you attach to your ZFS. Yeah, that was also Brendan Gregg. Is there a bit of a celebrity moment when you meet these people? Because that would be like
a little bit, but at the same time, it's really weird when all of them know who I am.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, they're watching the shows.
But the thing is, you look around the room and almost everybody has done something big, and so you don't quite get that because it's just. But you know, there's not really any snobbishness or anything like that.
It's an interesting way that collaboration happens. It's very organic. It's very cool.
It's like, you know, he was talking. Brendan Gregg was giving his talk in the developer summit because he actually gave 2 different talks.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, you know, we can monitor what's happening when it's burning CPU cycles, but it's hard to do some of the lock tests because you can't actually tell what's happening when a program isn't using the CPU, when it's waiting for something else to happen first. And he's like, well, I made this hack, but it's really slow. And then Adrian Chad from the back of the room shouted out, oh, we have procstat minus KKA for that. And then he's like he's like piping it into grep and then sed and a bunch of other stuff, and people are like, oh, do this with awk, and he's like, I know, and he's typing as fast as he can.
See, this is something that's pretty neat, and it brings us actually to our first sponsor, IX Systems. IXsystems.com/TechSNAP is where you need to go. They're the key driving force behind Meet BSD, and it's because they realize that this fundamental collaboration, something that you bring all of these people together, they work on these things. Even though they cannot attribute a direct sale to having this, they know.
Well, they gave away a FreeNAS Mini at the conference.
Yeah.
So there's one they can't attribute. But.
Well, I guess, is that a sale though?
Not really, but, but I'm sure he'll need hard drives for it.
What it does very clearly demonstrate is the very long-term thinking of IX Systems. The exact kind of long-term thinking that you want your hardware provider to have, because it's the same kind of long-term thinking that you have to have. When you're building infrastructure, you have to have the immediate needs and the long-term vision. And it's something that only a few of us can do, and that's what makes us good at our jobs. And that's what makes IX Systems good at their jobs. So go to IXsystems.com/TechSNAP. Get the white glove treatment. Check out some of the systems they have to offer. I have FreeNAS here. We have the FreeNAS Mini, the last version. It is a rock solid appliance level box that has continued to perform day in and day out for the Jupiter Broadcasting Network. Alan grabs all IX.
We didn't actually finish telling the story about it, but so they had the 2 FreeNAS Minis, the cheap little boxes, and they had them set up in a high availability state, and it kept working until they pulled out 7 out of the 8 hard drives.
And just the Mini?
Yeah. And then they pulled out the last of the hard drives, and it hung, obviously, because there was no hard drives left.
That is such an awesome demonstration.
They had it set up with high availability across 2 4-disc mirrors.
That's brave,
so
too.
It was a 4D mirror.
That's
so obviously,
brave.
You had 8 hard drives, and you got the size out of one of them, but you could take out 7 of the hard drives and smash them with a hammer, and it still worked.
I've had clients where that data availability, there's just nothing more important than that integrity.
Exactly. Got to keep it up.
You got to go over to IX Systems right now. Go to IXsystems.com/TechSNAP. That way we get credit for it. Lets them know you appreciate them supporting the show. It's a great way to sort of say, yes, thank you for supporting TechSNAP. And you can learn more. They've got a white paper over there you can download. You check that out. I'm telling you, you're going to be very impressed. I know you've struggled with your hardware provider before because I've been in your position.
Especially when you're buying a server for open source.
Yeah.
Whether it's Linux or BSD or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, there's always, it's like, well, it works great on Windows, but on Linux, if you use this one particular old version of Linux,
right? Yes,
you've kind of massaged it to kind of work.
Red Hat Enterprise version 5 something, or
yeah,
it is the worst. That is the worst.
I saw an email on the mailing list on FreeBSD this morning saying, I need a little help to get CentOS 4 working on Beehive because we have this customer and they won't they have an app that can't upgrade.
Oh.
And it's like, yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, they're just, and I mean, from the at the community level, at the quality level, all of it. IX Systems is where you want to go. You guys, we've talked about them for a while, and there's a reason. So check them out. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. Okay, well, Alan, I'm super jealous. I think right now, and I don't know if as FreeBSD continues to gain popularity, I don't know if these conferences will stay this size, but the moment that you are in right now is, not to go over the top, but it's kind of precious in a way, because as it grows, these conferences are going to get bigger, right?
Yep.
And some of the return will diminish a little bit. It'll still be really good, but this is the best time right now.
Yeah, it's the fact that I got to talk to half of the people that were there, and if the conference gets bigger, then that's a little harder. But
yeah,
it was also interesting. Just there was 5 or 6 people that Chris and I talked to that only came because we told them to.
How cool is that?
They hadn't heard of it before, or wouldn't have considered coming if we hadn't invited them and said, "No, this isn't for developers only. This is for everybody."
As the events grow, we met. I mean, lowballing it maybe by 100. I would say we met 300 people at Ohio Linux Fest that came just because they heard about it on LAS. And it's so cool. It is the coolest thing to have people that learn about these events and they come there and then they get more engaged. It's a pretty neat thing. I'm looking forward to future events. And we might soon have a calendar of events that's public of the different open source and BSD and all the Linux and all of the different tech events that Jupiter Broadcasting crew are attending that we'll have publicly available. So that's my way of saying, if you think about it, work with producer Eric, because he's going to be putting all this together, and we'll have a public calendar of the events we're going to attend, because having been to a few of them now, I know it's a huge part. And not only that, but it's just a really good professional resource. Like at Ohio Linux Fest, we sat down at a table for about an hour or two, and we just talked about like problems that sysadmins have had, and like people ask me like more details about like how I migrated to from 30 Windows servers to 1CUP's Linux print server, and I went into details and asked specific questions about the drivers, and it's just this really great chance to exchange information.
And we saw some similar talks at MeetBSD. There was the Voxer guys. They didn't actually give a talk, but everybody was raving about the interview they did on BSD Now. That one was really popular.
That's cool
because they switched all of their instances over to FreeBSD. And actually, Brendan Gregg was actually talking about if he can come up with the right benchmarks to justify it, he wants to move all of Netflix's data science stuff that's all currently Linux to FreeBSD.
And I just thought, I meant to put in the roundup, Netflix just open sourced something pretty cool today. I might grab that for the roundup, because they just put out some new code like today.
Oh, they've done that before. They did a bunch of attack tools and stuff for defending your website. Anyway.
All right, should we get to our first story?
We should get to the first story.
It comes from, guess what?
Conferences are amazing, and also FreeBSD.org has a calendar of FreeBSD
there you go.
Specific events.
Yeah. And I think and so as what I was just to button up that last bit, we're not there yet, but as the JB crew decides we're going to attend different events, we'll be having those on a public calendar, so you can find out and meet up and attend those too. All right, so let's get to our first story this week. It comes from one and only, you guessed it, Brian Krebs, and he kind of sounds like he's spotlighting one of the world's more famous and infamous spammers.
Yes, but mostly because of an interesting technique that was used in this case.
Let's hear it.
So prolific spammer MicroPersuade, who's been caught spamming yet again. The reason he's famous is that he's 37-year-old from San Diego, and he was the first spammer to ever be criminally prosecuted, although that was 13 years ago now, back in 2001. So in, I think it was 1998, he was sued by AOL for spamming. In 2001, he was charged by the San Diego District Attorney's Office, and alleging that he and an accomplice crashed a company's email server after routing their spam to the company's server. And also in 2000, he admitted to one felony count for stealing from the U.S. government when he was prosecuted for fraud relating to asbestos removal work he did for the U.S. Navy, where I'm guessing he didn't actually remove any asbestos.
That's not a good idea.
So he's kind of got a track record.
All right.
But by following a string of clues in the details used to register about 1,100 new domains that were used to send spam, researcher Ron Gilmet was able to string together a bunch of information and tie all the information together. So by looking at a bunch of signatures on the way they set up the domains, where they point them, email addresses they use, all this stuff, he was able to prove that it was MicroPersuade who had registered these 1,100 new domains that were where the spam sends you to, or where the spam was sent from, and so on. What makes this case specifically interesting, because, spam on the internet is not exactly news.
No, sure.
Was the technique that was used to send the spam. So the chain of events starts back with a block of IP addresses getting added to a blacklist because they were sending spam. Happens all the time. And ISPs find out, hey, a block of our IPs just got added to a spam list. We need to find out why and get rid of the spammer and get it unlisted.
Yeah, sure.
The owner of the IP addresses was quite certain that they were not sending any spam and that none of their customers were sending any spam and that they didn't host any spammers.
Of course not.
So they told Cisco, no, you must be mistaken.
Of course.
So Cisco provided the evidence. And the company's like, well, that definitely is our IP address. And how is it sending spam? So when they looked into on their network, they found that they weren't even using that IP address. That one chunk of IP addresses was actually not announced or dormant. Basically, wasn't hooked up to anything. It wasn't actually routable on the internet.
Womp womp.
So because the IPs were dormant, right, they weren't being announced by a BGP, there was no way on the internet to get to those IP addresses. There was no route. Turns out what happened is the spammers had looked all around the internet and found ranges of IPs that were dormant like that, and then announced those from their servers. So then the spammer basically takes over those IP addresses, kind of hijacks them.
Yeah.
We've seen that before. We talked about months ago about that happening to some banks and stuff, right? Where people would do a BGP hijack, take over the site, and then do man in the middle or something or phishing or whatever, and capture traffic for those users. Or less long ago, we talked about the one company that did it accidentally and broadcasted routes to the entire internet via their one ISP out to the other ISP and tried to route the entire internet through their small link.
Yeah.
So it happened before, but in this case, they were doing it on IPs that weren't being used because it takes a lot longer for someone to notice that, right? If legitimate customers stop coming to your website because you got hijacked, you notice that. If it's a block of IPs you're not using, you didn't notice until you got an email saying, hey, you're sending spam.
Right.
So this allowed the spammers to send spam from clean IP addresses that had never been used to send spam before. So the spammer in question claims that he didn't know the IP addresses were hijacked, that one of the ISPs that he hired to put his servers at was selling him stolen IPs, probably because they knew he was going to use it for spam. Of course, the researcher says he doesn't quite believe that. Persuade made it sound like this was a common occurrence that, when we find out this is happening, we demand our money back. We don't want to use stolen IPs. Even though it gets our spam delivered better and makes us more money, we definitely don't want to do that.
No, of course.
But yeah, and then in the follow-up comment at the bottom of the article, Krebs got in touch with Renaissance, the guys that do the research on this stuff. You remember we talked about them. I think they covered that story about the ISP routing this, or the guys routing the whole internet. They also did the story. Remember where one company's ISP added a DNS server in Europe, and it became closer than the DNS server in the same data center because of the way BGP works. Yeah, and it caused them to have weird stuff. They do all kinds of network research like that, and so they've been monitoring this, and they have an ongoing list of the IPs that are currently being hijacked. And specifically, they're going after stuff that wasn't being used. Like there's a bunch of blocks of IPs from Iran where they're only accessible inside Iran. So for the rest of the internet, they don't exist. And so they've been able to just grab those and use them on the internet as if they did exist. But I thought that's an interesting story, and there's lots more detail in the article if you click through to that.
And I hear about these stories about the people that do this research and stuff, and it just sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like it'd be a great gig.
Yep. Although I don't know how much money is in some of it. Some of these are just, one guy got tired of getting spammed, and he just decided in his spare time he was going to make these people's lives harder.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's a good book in it somewhere, Alan.
Well, Krebs just wrote a book called Spam Nation. It comes out in a couple of weeks.
I've already pre-ordered it.
Yeah.
So, did you pre-order yours?
I have not pre-ordered that one yet.
Well, I will when it comes out.
I still
I will
have to
grab
read this, and you can see how thick it is.
That is what is that, like 600 pages? What is that thing there?
No, it's like 900 and something.
I wonder if Krebs.
They specifically used less thick paper to make the book fit on your bookshelf and not weigh a ton. It's 846 pages plus the index.
I'm gonna see if Spam Nation's gonna come out in Audible. Oh shoot! It is.
Ooh,
I might get that too. You know what? I might grab it in Audible too.
That might be a little harder to listen to. It'd be really good for putting you to sleep though.
You know what though? That's
885 pages with the index.
Don't discount that. Actually, I think.
No, that's my problem. Is I get books that are too exciting and I can't sleep because I get interested in the book.
Yeah. All right. You know what? I'm not kidding. I think I'm gonna pre-order it right now on Audible. I mean, I already got the.
And at the bottom of the article, Krebs also talked a little bit about RPKI, which is a system to stop route hijacking by like saying, the routes will only ever come from here.
Yes.
And I proved this with my certificate. And
yes.
Stuff. It's just not widely adopted yet. But hopefully, because of this level of hijacking, they'll have to implement that everywhere.
There we go. I just pre-ordered the Spam Nation and audio. Nice. So I will. The reason why I did that is because I want to try to give an overview of it here on TechSNAP. Now, I don't know if I will be successful in that, but I will attempt.
That would be, and then I'll also probably try to do this book a little bit too. This is how to build FreeBSD from scratch, or how everything in FreeBSD works. So that one's probably not a best.
I have
a bunch of other great Michael Lucas and Peter Hanstein books that I could go through as well.
I put a link in the show notes in our first story to the Audible version, and then you know what? If I remember during the break, I'll make that an affiliated link so JB gets a little kickback if people get that.
Nice.
All right, Alan. So there you go. That's a good little insight from Brian Krebs. Why don't we take our first break and thank Ting? Head over to techsnap.ting.com. Techsnap.ting.com will take $25 off your first Ting device. If you have a Ting-compatible device, what I call if you're pro level, if you're Ting Pro level, they'll give you $25 credit right there on your Ting account. If you're like me, that'll get you more than your first month of service. Here's what's great about Ting. No contract, so no early termination fee. But I would say even better than that. It's just $6 for the line, and then you pay for your usage. You don't have to buy like a preset amount of minutes that you might use, and you don't have to say, well, I might need more than 4 gigs of data, so I better get the 6 gig data plan. But I don't think I'm going to need 5 gigs, right? You don't have to play this game. You don't have to guess how many text messages you're going to use. You don't have to guess if you might need tethering a few times a month. You just pay for what you use. So Ting takes your messages, your megabytes, your minutes. They add them up at the end of the month. Whatever bucket you fall into, that's what you pay. If you want hotspot, if you want tethering, you just turn it on. If you want to just use Ting as a mobile ISP, that's fine. If you want to make all your calls over Wi-Fi, that's fine. If you want to get instant customer service, guess what? You can. Because they have no-hold customer service. Call them. 1-855-TING-FTW. Seriously, call them. 1-855-TING-FTW. Anytime between 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. and a real human answers the phone. These people are empowered to answer your questions. They're Android enthusiasts. Ting makes sure that that way they get the geeks in there. They interview geeks. With whoever seems to be the geekiest, that's who Ting hires. How much do you love that? They bring them in there. They run the customer service. Then they have the amazing control panel where you can turn lines off, set up nicknames, set alerts, get thresholds. It's awesome. And you all can get started by going to techsnap.ting.com right now. No more contract. No more early termination fee. No more prepaying. You just pay for what you use. You have complete control. And they'll bring it all in front of you with their dashboard. It's pretty cool. And check out their blog, too. Their staff is always talking about stuff you can do with your devices. Right now, they have another top 5 apps for teens this time, for the younger generation. You can find that at the Ting blog. They also have information about sales, new devices, and other and kind of announcements and things like that. Get started by going to techsnap.ting.com. Take advantage of our offer. Let them know you appreciate them supporting the TechSNAP show, and try out their savings calculator.
Yeah, I wish I could have had that.
Yeah, I actually got an email from a viewer, Alan. He's going to save $4,000 every 2 years by switching to Ting. Here's what you do. You go to techsnap.ting.com. Click the savings calculator. Put in your information on what you actually use. So for me, I don't use a lot of minutes. 300 is extremely, extremely generous for me. Text messages, I pretty much do everything over Viber, but let's be generous. Let's give me 100 messages. That is extremely generous. Maybe like an alerting service fires off over SMS, and so I get those. And megabytes used. Now this is where I spend some money. 2 gigs.
Well, you see, you think you spent some money, but I was in the States for, 5 days-ish, and I used 40 megabytes, and that's probably going to cost me more than you paid.
Well, so here's my dad's bill. So my dad's bill for essentially what he's using, he gets it from the big carrier here in the U.S. that starts with a V, $149. Then, and that's before taxes. That's because after taxes, it's way more than $149. But this is what my dad's bill is right now. So if my dad were to switch to Ting, I already got my mom to switch. If my dad were to switch to Ting, he would save $2,448 every 2 years. Go to techsnap.ting.com. Click that savings calculator and tell me you couldn't buy yourself at least a badass SSD every single year or a great new laptop every couple of years by switching to Ting. TechSnap.ting.com. See why I've switched. I am nearing the 2-year mark, Alan. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm feeling good.
Yep.
TechSnap.ting.com, and a big thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSnap program. All right, Alan, tell me about No Go To Fail. It's something Google's working on, right?
Yes. So it's a tool they've released on GitHub, and specifically, SSL and TLS have had a number of vulnerabilities lately. In the past we had, Beast and things like that, and then we have Heartbleed. Apple had the go-to-fail in their SSL library, where it wouldn't check the validity of a certificate properly. GNU, TLS, and NSS, which is the Netscape security library, which was also used in Chrome and Firefox.
Yeah.
It has had its own certificate verification flaw problems. Yeah. And then most recently, we had the Poodle vulnerability. That basically means we have to stop using SSL altogether and only use TLS. Because of all this, now it's getting kind of complicated to keep track of what stuff is still vulnerable and what isn't, and so on. So to help researchers and administrators test for these vulnerabilities, Google has released their new tool called No Go To Fail. So it allows developers to set up an infrastructure through which they can run known attacks against the target application. It has the ability to execute various attacks that require man-in-the-middle position, which is one of the key components of many of the attacks, including Poodle, Beast, and all the others.
Right.
The core of No Go To Fail is on the on-path network man-in-the-middle tool named nogotofail.mitm. Or
MITM, yeah.
Yep, that intercepts TCP traffic. It is designed to primarily run on path and centers around a set of handlers for each connection, which are responsible for actively modifying the traffic to test for vulnerabilities or passively look for issues. So No Go To Fail is completely port agnostic and instead detects vulnerable traffic using deep packet inspection instead of basing it on port numbers.
Interesting.
Additionally, because it uses deep packet inspection, it is also capable of testing SSL and TLS traffic that uses Start TLS. So it can even detect a connection that starts plain text and upgrades to SSL, where, if you did it just on port numbers or just by looking at the first couple of packets, you wouldn't see that.
Yeah.
So the tool can be deployed on a client to detect whenever your machine ends up making a connection that might be vulnerable.
That's nice.
Or it can be deployed on routers and VPNs to possibly even just block any connection that a user's trying to make that would be to a vulnerable endpoint.
Now, it looks like they've also made an Android tool that developers can use, right?
Yes. This was originally designed by the Android team, and it's been ported and it's available all over the place now, so that you can use it to tell when a device is making a connection that might be vulnerable. It includes a bunch of modules. They have one where, if it is vulnerable, it'll replace all the images in the on the websites with a custom image, telling people that they need that, this might be vulnerable or whatever. Or there's a bunch of other cool stuff they can do.
Oh, neat. Well, that's pretty cool, Alan. That is actually Google.
And the project's up on GitHub, and there's a nice getting started doc to let you start playing with it.
I'm looking for the...
What are you looking for?
Well, I was hoping that this thread post link, or I was hoping the thread post article had a link to the GitHub page.
The show notes have a link to the
Well,
GitHub
look
page.
at you. Look at you. Very
And
nice. Yep,
the
there
Threat
it is.
Post article does have a link to GitHub.
Oh, okay.
It's probably just buried in the middle of a sentence
Yeah,
or something.
I see it, though. Very nice. Okay.
Yeah,
very
and
good.
it covers how have to generate a man-in-the-middle server certificate to do this, and then they talk about the image replace thing, and they have some walkthroughs and show you how you would set it up.
That's damn impressive, is what that is. Huh.
Yep. I currently use it on a router mode only works with IP tables, but I'm sure that can be fixed pretty easily.
Well, I was thinking when you said that, I was thinking pfSense, right? Build that in there. That'd be really cool. Maybe it's
specifically being able to block users with a nice error message saying, "Hey, the endpoint you're talking to is not secure. You probably don't want to do that."
Yeah. Alan, we have a epic ton of feedback. But before we move on to that, I want to thank DigitalOcean. Go over to DigitalOcean.com right now. They're going to get you taken care of. DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. Go over there and try something right now and use our promo code SNAPNovember. SNAPNovember when you check out will give you a $10 credit. SNAPNovember is a brand new promo code for the month of November. And users can create a cloud server in less than 55 seconds. Some of you, like Tony, emailed me, got it done in like 32 seconds this week. And pricing plans start only $5 per month. That'll give you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. And DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and in London. Go to Instagram to check out DigitalOcean's Instagram feed to see pictures of their data centers. They are sweet. They have great setups. And it's not just their hardware, which I honestly do appreciate, but it's also how you manage your DigitalOcean droplet. It's truly revolutionary. It is one of these kinds of things that will change how people design dashboards to manage systems going forward. And you think I'm kidding, but it's already begun to happen. It is now the new benchmark. Their interface is simple. Their control panel is intuitive yet extremely powerful. And power users can even replicate it on a much larger scale with DigitalOcean's straightforward API. And you're already seeing great plugins to tie it into things like Puppet and Chef or OS X or Unity's desktop. All of these things already take advantage of the API. So even if you're not going to write your Ruby script or Python script to take advantage of the API, you can use the community scripts, the community's code that's already out there. Because DigitalOcean has an incredible community around it. And they're growing it even more so with their community tutorials. In fact, if you check out the link on our show notes, you can find out how you can get paid up to $200 by DigitalOcean to write a tutorial, easy for me to say, a tutorial, and they'll pay up to $200. They got editors.
Nice.
So you don't have to be, if you're like me, you have problems with the words, DigitalOcean's okay with that. That's what their editors are for. You write the tutorial, you make it something that works on DigitalOcean, something that maybe you already know how to do. Like, I kind of think I should have done this. I think I was one of the first to deploy OwnCloud 7 on a DigitalOcean droplet. I should have wrote the tutorial for that. I wouldn't, $200, I could use $200. Angie's birthday's coming up. That would be very handy. But now you can go get $200. And we've got the link in the show notes. Go check it out. They really want to make sure that they've got the best tutorials in the business, and that's why they're willing to pay for it. And that's what I love about DigitalOcean through and through. They really have invested early on the stuff that matters, and now it pays off. And that's why they're growing like crazy. So go use our promo code SNAPNovember, get a $10 credit, and try out the $5 droplet for free for 2 months. DigitalOcean.com, SNAPNovember when you check out. Or actually, it's not even when you check out. The way it works is you just apply that to your account, and you get a $10 credit in your account, and the balance is like paid for 2 months. It's easy.
Right. So if you actually are already using DigitalOcean and just never used a coupon code, you can even apply it to an account you already have paid for.
This is what I'm saying.
And you get your next 2 months free or whatever.
Isn't that slick? It's
Yes.
really cool. Hey, Alan, before we run, we should probably mention that episode 62 of BSD Now just came out. Gift from the Sun.
Yes, it is probably one of the best episodes. Everybody at the conference, MeetBSD, was always raving about the Voxer interview, which was really good. But this one was my favorite interview with Pavel Dolodek about the original story of porting ZFS to FreeBSD from Sun back then when it was still Solaris.
I can see why you like it.
And not just that, but he talks about all the other cool stuff he does. But it's just a really, really great story. Right, it's not just, I ported ZFS. It was like, well, I thought it would take me months, and then I got really into it and did it all really quick, and yeah, it was really good.
Episode 62 of BSD Now. You can go check that out. And I don't have a specific episode of Tech Talk Today to recommend, This whole week has been fascinating. In the last couple of days, Google has announced some really interesting initiatives around Drive. Microsoft announced a surprise partnership with Dropbox. Cloud storage from the big players is really getting nuts. And this entire week of Tech Talk Today really cataloged all of that. But if you're going to only listen to one episode, I recommend episode 87 of Tech Talk Today. We get into what Google just announced, what Microsoft announced yesterday, and then sort of at the very end of the episode, it kind of brings it all together. It's very fascinating doing a daily show when there's a story that kind of unravels every single day, and you track it every day. So I recommend the whole week, but if you can only pick one, episode 87 of Tech Talk Today was pretty interesting. But, Alan, I think that's all the news for the top of the show, right?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. Okay, well, look at us. Keep on moving on. All right, well, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, submitting a thread over at TechSNAP.reddit.com. And Alan, our first email today comes in from viewer Oliver, and he has some questions about, I like how he categorized this, okay? He said home server, SSH, permissions, and spousal approval. At home, I've set up a Linux server for all our media, like music, videos, pictures. It runs perfect, at least for me. We use SSH to access the server and mount the media directory to our local machines. Since I mostly upload all of the work, the permissions are set to my account, my user, and my group. This prevents my wife from accessing the data. So after uploading, I always have to set the group attribute manually. It's quite a hassle. So my simple question is this: how can I configure the system to upload and save the media with a certain group as default? Or will I always have to manually change it? I know it's a basic question, but the Googles have failed me. Hey, wait, let me try it again. DuckDuckGo, no, nothing. Now DuckDuckGo has failed me. Thanks, guys. I really love the shows.
Yes. So by default, when you upload a file, it gets the group assigned based on your primary group. So you could change your primary group and make your current primary group your secondary group or whatever. For most users, by default, their primary group is the one that matches their username, right? So I'm Alan in the group Alan, but I can change my primary group to be a different group, and that way all the files would do that as well. The other consideration there is also your UMask, which is the default file permissions.
Yes.
You can make it so that by default, when you create a new file, group has the right permission on it, and that will allow other people in the group to then modify or change the files that you do upload like that. Depending on what you're doing, it depends. Like here, I use Samba for most of the file sharing stuff, and because of that,
You can, with a
it
Samba
does all
share.
the operations as the nobody user.
Right.
So I control the permissions
and
like
also
that.
with Samba, you can say at the time of creation, create it with this user or create it with these sets of permissions, and then it automatically does that. I think what's interesting, he's using SSH, which is fine.
But it's is he using SSHFS? Is that what he's using?
Well,
that's a little weird, but
on most Linux file managers, you just put SSH : /
right.
And it just mounts it as
It's actually using almost SFTP, but yeah. Okay.
But it's more. I think what he's doing is he's doing it more out of convenience than he's doing it. Yeah, and so if he just spent a little time setting up Samba.
The other thing is that you can move beyond the classic Unix permissions model and use ACLs, which will let you have two groups or two users that own a file. Especially if you're using NFS-v4, then you have NFS-v4 ACLs, and that also applies. ZFS uses those as well, and that allows you to do interesting stuff. Specifically, FreeNAS has this built in where you can actually has the adapter with the newer version of Samba to actually allow you to use the Windows permission management interface to manage your NFS v4 ACLs on your FreeNAS.
Right, and
so
that
people think that they're using a Windows file server and using Windows permissions, and really it's all ZFS.
Sometimes we joke around about spousal approval, but if you want employer approval, because then the Windows admins and all the people that know how to use Windows. Go ahead.
I was going to say for spousal approval. One of the other FreeBSD developers has it so their media center is just a PC connected to their computer, and then you log in with one user and you access the file shares, and then a different user you log in to play a DVD. And so it's basically by selecting which user to log in as, it just auto does what needs to be done to handle what the spouse needs to do.
Right, exactly. All right. Well, very good. So that's one place to start. The other, and then there is always Oliver, and Alan and Chris are not recommending this. There is the Hail Mary cron job.
Yeah, you can just CHOWN minus capital R. Yeah, so ZFS gives you the better ACLs, although ext4 has some level of ACLs. So.
Oh, sure. Oh, extended attributes? Oh, absolutely. Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely, for sure. They all do now.
But ZFS is better.
Well, we all agree on one thing, don't we? Yeah. Hey, you heard Oliver mention it. DuckDuckGo, you know that search engine that doesn't track you, the private search engine? I've been using them now for weeks. They've launched an initiative called DuckDuckHack.com. It's been around for a while. Go check it out at DuckDuckHack.com. I've learned about it kind of recently because Zach emailed into the show and he said, Alan and Chris, I know that the TechSNAP audience is pretty savvy, especially when it comes to the system administration realm, and we're trying to launch DuckDuckHack to make search more relevant for people, the exact type of people in our audience, people like Oliver, who are searching for these kinds of things like the right kind of Linux permissions and things like that. Well, if you go to duckduckhack.com, if you've got something you're an expert on, go submit a pull request over at DuckDuckHack and make DuckDuckGo search more relevant because your answers will be automatically integrated into the DuckDuckGo results. That's pretty powerful and it's pretty awesome. We've shown you some examples recently. And if you go over to DuckDuckHack, you can also try their tour to see some other things that people are working on. But, you know, I think I want to go beyond that with you guys. I'd like you to check out some of the stuff they already have in progress as well, because there's some really good ideas that I think you guys would specifically be qualified to jump in there and finish these things up. And what I think is awesome about this is if you have somebody like Alan who's really passionate about FreeBSD and ZFS, and if he had the free time, which not that Alan does because neither one of us really do, but if he had the time, he could go to DuckDuckHack and he could help make search more relevant, help make search more private. And I've been thinking a lot about how dominant Google is in this space and how they, even though they rely on so much of the technologies we talk about, really fail to expose appropriate information about it. Well, this is our chance to change that. You can get engaged in a conversation that's already happening over at DuckDuckHack, or you can submit your own pull request. So just go to duckduckhack.com. Submit your idea right now. They'll work with you, too, to make sure it happens. Tell them you heard about it on the TechSNAP show and try it out. You can help make search more private, more secure, and bring more open source to it. I think this is a huge opportunity for our audience. There's a lot of other podcasts out there, but I know our audience specifically is really the right audience for this. Try it out. I've been pretty impressed. I heard from Rotten Corpse, producer Rotten Corpse of the Linux Action Show. He went over there and he's working on something for Linux. I'm not going to talk about it yet till he's done, but it is really neat. And the nice thing about it is it's something he's passionate about, and he wants to make sure that when people are looking for that topic, they're going to get the right information, and you can do the same thing. Start by going to duckduckhack.com and check it out. And thanks to Oliver for mentioning it, too. All right, Alan, our next email comes in from Jeff. And Jeff has a question about printers with public IP addresses, and it sounds like it's something out of the early 90s when I was working in IT and NAT was kind of something people were still deploying. Or maybe it was even the late 80s. He says, many years ago, I was troubleshooting an HP printer at work and discovered something that had been bothering me for years. By doing a simple Google search, and you might have tried this too, of an error code around, I dig into some of the search results, I actually start seeing public links to HP printers. For example, if I search for HP 4350 Air 60.02, a lot of the results are public IPs and fully exposed web interfaces to HP JetDirects. Some of them appear to be at universities. This has created a lot of discussion over the years with my buddies and I. Chris and Alan, I'd like to get your take on whether this is intentional, the security concerns of doing this, and the networking these universities are using. Do you believe that these are entirely controlled DMZs or just sloppy security? Thanks again. I'm a big fan of TechSNAP. Part of my morning routine to wake up my brain. Keep up the good work. He even included a screenshot, too.
Screenshot. And so, admittedly, I just looked at the screenshot first before reading what he wrote. And I saw a printer with a publicly routable IP address. And I was like, I remember, every machine at my college had a publicly routable IP address, but you couldn't actually reach them, the firewall stuff. So basically, because they had 65,000 IP addresses, they just give every machine they did their NAT, but the inside IPs were not an unroutable IP range, one of the private address spaces. They just used their public address space internally, and everything still got natted. And so it was still all firewalled. So I've kind of figured, oh, yeah, they're just doing that, right? But then I typed in the IP address in my browser, and I'm currently reconfiguring that printer right now. And that's obviously a little concerning. Yeah, I don't know why this is there.
There's no reason for it.
Yeah, basically, they should definitely have a firewall rule that says you can only access this internally.
So fundamentally, there's zero reason. Because internet printing is a thing. You don't need this to do that. It comes down to, for some reason, these printers have public IP addresses. And like the school district I used to work for,
well,
we transitioned from all public
concern looking at this is the fact that this web interface exists without any authentication. So even if this was only inside the school,
right?
I just changed the date on that printer. It now thinks it's January of 2004.
I mean, I don't know what to say.
I'm half tempted to change this printer's IP address right now so it's not on the internet.
To do them a favor.
It doesn't make any sense. Can I make everything print one line per page or something?
Mm-hmm.
The black ink cartridge only has 5% remaining. They really need to get more ink for it.
Yeah.
It might be because the internet is printing things to it. Like, warning, I'm printing to this printer over the internet.
Send them a note saying TechSNAP says hello. Hi there, from TechSNAP. All right, Alan. Are you ready for
this? This is kind of ludicrous, and they shouldn't be doing this.
I know.
Even if it is in a DMZ, that doesn't excuse.
No.
This
There's
is
no
a
reason.
bad firewall.
Yes.
Bad firewall.
Chat room wants you to go for it, by the way. All right, Gordon writes in. He's got a question directed straight to you, Alan. So get ready for this. Hey, Alan and Chris. First, thanks for all your detailed discussions on my previous queries a few weeks ago. I've decided to go with the option of putting a dual 10 gigabit NIC in the pfSense box, but I've had a lot of trouble locating a compatible NIC here in the UK. I have sent the FreeBSD10 HCL for 10 gigabits NICs to several suppliers, but none of them seem to be able to tally the compatible chipsets with actual NIC models. Having heard Alan is the proud owner of a new dual gigabit NIC, I wondered if you could share the make and model of your card that you purchased, and I'm sure that one will work with BSD. Thanks once again, Gordon.
So yes and no. Specifically, I bought this one because it works, but not great.
Okay.
And I bought it specifically to work on a tuning guide for making this one work better. So if you're buying a brand new one, especially for production, it's not necessarily the one I would recommend.
Not yet.
But this is the Intel X540T2.
That does. So that one, though, out of the box, maybe not a great experience yet.
I think it tops out at 6 or 7 gigabits, which is probably enough for what you're doing. But if you're actually trying to get 10 gig out of it, it's not going to work.
So the driver works.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, to a point anyway.
That's really odd.
The recommended one is the Chelseo 10 gig stuff.
Chelsea. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to see quick here. Netflix uses stuff, and they don't actually specifically... here we go. They use the Chelseo T540-CR quad port 10 gigabit Ethernet card.
Quad?
Yeah, well, they're if we look at their older ones, no, they use quad on that one as well. The initial one wasn't quad. They used the Supermicro add-in card for the original version, but for the newer stuff, they use a quad port Chelseo T540.
T540, okay.
It's funny because the Intel is a T540 as well. Or sorry, it's an X540T. So yeah, but the Chelseo is the recommended one for best performance. But cost-wise, I think they're very much more expensive than this. So you have to weigh how much performance you actually need out of it versus what you have in your budget.
I mean, long-term bet is, I really don't know how these things kind of work out for FreeBSD, but long-term bet is perhaps the Intel one the better bet?
Chelseo and Intel both actively work with FreeBSD to write the drivers.
Chelseo's
so
just as good of a
drivers
bet.
for both.
Yeah.
The Chelseo cards just work better currently.
Okay.
Honestly, most of the work right now is to get to 40 gigabit stuff to work. It's very much
10.
looking like we're just going to skip 10 and go straight to 40. 10 has some drawbacks with its design that are apparently causing some problems. But yes, I bought 2 of the Intel X 540Ts, and they definitely work. I'm just not sure.
Right.
You won't be able to max out the 10 gigs with the Chelseo.
You will.
Like using the quad port card, Netflix sends like 25 gigabits a second out of each appliance. And at that point, I think they're limited by the fact they can only fit so many drives in the appliance.
Okay. All right, Alan. Next email comes in from Chris N. And I think this is one you can probably debunk pretty quickly. He says, hello, Alan and Chris and JB Crew. Several months ago, I asked Alan a question about the best way to switch my unraid NAS to free NAS. He's still waiting to pull the trigger. He has a couple of questions. He says most laptops and desktops that people have usually only have one hard drive in them. Also, not many desktops or laptops have ECC RAM in them. So he's wondering if ECC RAM is necessary for continuous air checking. He's considering deploying ZFS on his laptop, but his laptop doesn't have ECC RAM. I know I could read and learn all of this, but since Alan already knows if this is fast enough and if it'd be okay, I thought maybe he could share his knowledge with the world. Thanks so much. Never miss an episode. Long-time listener.
So none of the features in ZFS rely on ECC, and the chance of corruption happening because you don't have ACC is the same no matter what file system you use.
And he also wondered what you thought about using compression on a laptop.
Compression is great. It allows you to get basically impossible speeds. Like even on my SSD, which can do up to 500 megabytes a second, if I have a file that compresses really good, like a giant text file or something, then all of a sudden I'm reading the compressed version at 500 megabytes a second and then expanding it to the uncompressed version in RAM. And all of a sudden now, even though my SSD can handle 500 megabytes a second, I'm actually getting 1500 megabytes a second reading that file because of the compression.
Oh, yeah.
So the compression is great.
Yes.
ZFS on a single drive, I do it on my laptop.
Okay.
It won't be able to fix most problems it would run into, but unlike other file systems, it would at least tell you when there is one. Right? Because it checksums the file and would notice when you read it and you get back garbage. So instead of you blissfully not knowing that you're reading it back and it's not coming out right, you would at least be told.
Right. That's something at least,
and
right?
And if you have certain files that are more important, you can set copies equals 2 or 3 in ZFS, and it will store it on multiple places on the same drive. So, and try to at least provide you some benefit in that case.
Now, of note, he's planning to use Linux, so something else you might consider is XFS or Extended 4 for the root partition and ZFS or ZFS for the home partition, something like that. You could do that as well.
Because I don't think Linux can boot off ZFS yet.
There is ways to make it work, but I would say why not go with...
I haven't seen that. I haven't even seen any of that. So,
but why not go with So maybe best go Extended 4 or ZFS XFS for the root and my laptop, ZFS for the home.
Right. Like you were saying, laptops only having one drive. It depends on the laptop. My laptop has one spinning drive built in. I swapped out my CD drive with an Ultra Bay thing that gives me a second drive.
Nice.
And actually, internally, you can also usually install an MSATA. Most laptops now will have a port that you could use for like a 3G or 4G modem or an MSATA. And so you can actually add an extra drive to your computer that way. Mm-hmm. So my laptop could technically fit 3 drives. An MSATA, and then the 2 regular SATA drives.
All right, Nico writes in, and this one's a tough one. He says, I've been working with a big vendor to set up a health information exchange. Our company would send patient data to them to be stored in a central repository. Very cool stuff for patient care, no doubt. The project involves setting up VPNs, configuring interfaces to push data through the HL7 and DCOM protocols, and validating that all the data fields are mapped properly. We're now on the final stage of testing, and this is my story. Their dashboard would not load any computer or domain because we rolled out GPO that disabled SSL version 3, requiring all HTTPS traffic to use TLS 1.0 or above. I reported this to the vendor and asked them to use TLS and not SSL 3. Their response was, try HTTP instead of HTTPS. Of course, this didn't work. HTTP just redirected to HTTPS. I reported back to the I reported back to the vendor saying that even though this would have worked, it would have meant sending data unsecurely, and that they needed to enable TLS. Their last response from the vendor was, "We don't believe that this is in the scope of this project, and that we would need a change request." I'm baffled. The contact person of the vendor signs the emails with all of these acronyms next to his name: MD, MS, MBA, PMP. and his job title is Senior IT Project Manager. But what would you do in this position? Poodle was all over the news in the IT world, and if they haven't addressed this, how can I really trust them? How will they ever be on top of the ever-changing IT security world? If this vendor addresses this problem, I think my best action would be to advise upper management to either pull out if they don't fix it or proceed with caution. Is this overreacting? I would really hate for patient data to leak out because of this, and if that's going to happen, I want to make sure that my butt and my company's butt is covered by making sure there's a record this issue was brought up and then neglected by the vendor. I'm curious about your feedback on this, and thank you.
Yeah, I heard similar stories from a university where they had a company where all the students would send their resumes and stuff, and then they had the same problem. They disabled SSL v3, and then nobody could connect to it. Although that when the university security people complained, the other vendor got it sorted out after 5 or 6 days. A lot of the problems, it turns out, are the security appliances, firewalls, and load balancers that people have in front of their hardware that only support SSL v3. So they actually have to get an update from F5 or whatever in order to enable TLS.
Yeah, that's a good point. It could be a hardware problem.
But then it comes down to your vendor hasn't installed the updates for their F5 load balancer or whatever.
Yes.
But yeah, the fact that I understand that, basically it seems this manager doesn't know what TLS is or about Poodle, and I'm not quite sure how he doesn't, but sometimes it's nice to be able to talk to an engineer who would know and be like, yeah, we need a couple days to get that sorted or whatever.
He definitely needs to document it.
Yeah. Although the one downside is if you document that, we found this vendor to be bad and then we went with them anyway, then that can come back to get you just as bad as not having documented that, they were being dumb.
What it has to be is then you have to do risk mitigation, right? And you have to document that you've done that appropriately. Yep. So be prepared for that. That's a tough situation, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's sort of like if you discover they stored their passwords in clear text.
Yeah.
I feel like we need better. I feel like we should have better advice, Alan.
Yeah. Yeah. Try to go around that manager and talk to someone and get the TLS set up.
Start there. Document what you found. Yeah. I think that's really it, right? Okay.
But this was obviously predictable. But I don't know the best way to tell you what to do about it.
Well, and enterprise applications they do not move quickly. I mean, and quickly means like things that happened in the last year.
Yep.
By their definition.
Well, especially embedded appliances and stuff, you can literally take much longer than that. This is why OpenBSD was jumping on the 64-bit time T setup, because they've the computers that control oil pipelines get designed and then deployed and they last 10 or 15 years. So if we want to have it fixed by 2038, we have to have all the problems solved in the next 5 years, so that when the companies start building the products that will eventually be released and installed in the last 15 years, that'll deal with it through the 2038 problem.
All right, our last bit of feedback comes in from Daniel Blair at CMDanSCA on Twitter. He says, "Hey, Chris Lass, I'm wearing my TechSNAP 100th episode while getting interviewed for the Innovative or Die Days." And here it is, Alan. I'm going to play a clip of it. This is him, and if you watch closely, he's got his TechSNAP 100 shirt on. There it is.
To make sure everything is working properly. The entire thing's going to be running on a Banana Pi, which is a small Linux-powered computer with a 3D printed case.
We're working on a racing game.
Alan, your face is now immortal in this video right there. It happened quick, but that was your face. It's all a blur. If you're listening to the audio version and you want to see the TechSNAP 100 shirt get rocked, we'll have a link in the show notes. That was pretty cool. Thanks, Daniel, for sending that in. Alan, I think that's it now. You're super famous, right? Yep. It all confirmed. Hey, I saw a couple of TechSNAP 100 shirts at Ohio Linux Fest, so there was a few hardcore fans there as well. All right, well, if you'd like to send your feedback to the TechSNAP program, ask us a question, anything about storage, network, security, systems administration, networking, any of that good stuff, go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com. Click that contact link and choose TechSNAP from the dropdown. Or send us directly, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Or maybe even get some community input over at techsnap.reddit.com. But with all the feedback done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that just didn't fit at the top of the show, but we still want to give you some links to follow up on your own after the story. And a lot of these links came from our subreddit over at techsnap.reddit.com. And our first one's getting a lot of attention today. It's called WireLurker. And it's malware that affects iOS and Mac OS X, Alan, 2 for the price of 1. However, it seems like Apple's mostly squashed it. After causing an overnight sensation, the newly disclosed family of malware for iOS and iOS devices has been essentially put to rest. Researchers at Palo Alto Networks confirmed this morning that the command and control... Oh, hi there. The command and control supporting WireLurker network has been shut down. The servers that organized have been killed, and Apple has revoked the digital certificate that was used to sign the WireLurker code, which is an interesting aspect to this.
Well, yes. So it seems to suggest that the code got through and somehow was signed by Apple as being trustworthy.
Or an illegitimate certificate, at least. Researchers,
but depending on the how the app's built, it might have backup command and control servers that will kick in after a couple of days or something. So I wouldn't assume just shutting down the command and control systems has actually killed this completely.
What's interesting about this one, Alan, and this is what's kind of like could be a big problem for Apple, is it used a third-party app store. It infected almost 467 Mac OS X applications in this third-party app store. It gets installed on the Macs, and then when somebody plugged in their iOS device to that Mac, it then infected the iOS device, got all kinds of privileges, scraped their iMessages, scraped their all kinds of information without any jailbreak required. And it just kind of lurked on the Mac until you plugged in the iOS device. And what I think is fascinating about this is if you think about, fundamentally, when it comes down to the Macs, you have X number of USB chipsets, you have X number of types of firmware. It's a much more easily targetable amount of devices and a mix of hardware and software. And as Apple continues to grow in market share, their laptop sales are going nuts. They're selling tons of iPhones. This is becoming a pretty juicy target. And I think WireLurker is... Now, it's only in China right now. It's only with this third-party app store. But it could be the beginning of what people are going to start... I mean, these are users also that sometimes, have some expendable income it's worth going after. So we could see some interesting stuff.
I found the information about the certificate. The attack was able to get through by being legitimately signed. It was signed with a certificate from a Chinese company that had... They're a member of Apple's iOS Developer Enterprise Program. The program allows iOS application developers access to iOS developer libraries and other resources, and allows them to distribute homegrown signed iOS apps for users via an enterprise provisioning profile. So basically, it's when you are writing an app for your company to use internally, you can get a certificate for your company that allows you to sign your own apps. So that way, the devices of your employees will trust all Apple software and software issued by your company.
Right. You get kind of in that same...
But it seems the problem there is that regular people's phones accept those certificates, where it should only be when your phone is joined up to that enterprise's domain or something.
No kidding.
That it should trust that enterprise's domain. It seems like a flaw in the way Apple structured their certificate program. My phone should not trust the Chinese company's internal apps. I should have to do a step where, as part of the enterprise provisioning profile, it trusts my enterprise's certificate, which is how Windows Active Directory domains work.
I really hope that's not the case.
It seems like this app got installed on people's phones when they weren't, obviously, they didn't work at Hunan Luxiang Advertising Decoration Engineering Company. That's it's just a funny name for. Obviously, it seems this company made advertising apps. Could be being called the Advertising Decoration Engineering Company.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely seems like the way Apple structured their certificate setup, they're basically issuing subordinate CA certificates to enterprises, and those are being trusted because they're signed by the Apple certificate.
Yeah,
instead of actually making it a self-signed certificate that is then trusted when you join up with the enterprise provisioning profile. I think part of that is because Apple didn't want just anybody to be able to add their own certificate to their phone. So they wanted it has to be blessed by Apple first.
And they figure if we've blessed it,
Yeah, and so they had to revoke that because of the number of people that got infected by this. So it's definitely a flaw in the way in the design, like the way they thought it out when they built this.
Jeez. Hey, Alan, you know what I like is malware that gets better, like our next story in the roundup.
Yep. So a newer, harder to detect version of the back-off point-of-sales malware, so the one that actually infects the card readers.
Right.
And it does a bunch of things now. It removes all the stuff that's made it possible to detect by virus scanners. Like they don't, instead of the list of apps being just in that it's going to try to latch onto being in the program, they're all hashed so that researchers won't be as easily able to tell what it's targeting. And they did a bunch of other things like that. And they made it smarter about how it captures the data. And what they made it do is when it captures a credit card, it encrypts it so that antivirus couldn't just look for credit card numbers in memory and be like, hey, something's stealing your credit card there.
Right.
Also, when one of the command and control servers was shut down, they found that there were more than 1,000 point-of-sale systems still trying to connect to that control server. So assuming that, we know the ones at Target, Home Depot, and Dairy Queen have been cleaned up.
Yeah.
And P.F. Chang's have been cleaned up.
Right.
So there were still 1,000 point-of-sale systems that were still trying to talk to the command and control server when it was shut down.
What a mess.
And the newer version uses a different command and control server because the old one got shut down. So there's a lot of point-of-sale systems out there that are still infected.
Oy vey, Alan. Just based on the ones that are reporting home, we know that. Yikes. Yep. That's a mess. All right, well, here's another mess. The FBI is holding secret meetings to scare Congress into backing some legislation that might force Android and Apple to dial back their encryption. In September, both Apple and Google announced plans to encrypt information on iOS and Android devices by default. We gave it a mention here on the show. We thought it was a good move. Almost immediately, the head of the FBI, James Comey, and a bunch of others started freaking out and going on a media tour. Now, of course, the FBI and the Department of Justice are going up to Congress to tell them scary stories about just how necessary breaking encryption is for them to do their jobs, and TechDirt has a great story on it. And here's a quote from their article. The FBI and the Justice Department officials met with House staffers this week for a classified briefing on how encryption is hurting police investigations, according to staffers familiar with the meeting. Now, the briefing included Democratic and Republican aides for the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committees, the staffers said. The meeting was held in a classified room, and the aides are forbidden for revealing what was discussed. And the whole idea here is we need to lean and pressure these companies to give us built-in backdoors to the encryption that's built into Android L and iOS 8.
We've had this discussion ages ago with the Clipper chip and stuff. Basically, the problem is if you put a backdoor in encryption, somebody else can find it.
Yes, yes.
And as we've seen, there's a great XKCD comic that proves this, right? It's the whole rubber hose crypto analysis. Right. It's like the weak link to encryption is the keys and the person that has to remember that key. So it's much easier to, if the FBI needs what's on your phone, then they can get the court to force you to give up what's on the phone. Right? They don't need a backdoor to be able to do it without your permission.
Right, exactly. Well said, Alan.
Not that I think that people should be able to be forced to give up their encryption keys, but
well, that's true. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Weakening
there's a process
encryption
already.
Is not the answer. Yeah,
there's already
weakening
a process.
Encryption is not the answer.
There's already a legal process in place today that they can take advantage of. All right. Well, let's talk about Linksys. And Linksys has a patch out for a lot of the routers.
Yeah. Well, if you remember, we talked about back in July, there was Belkin, who owns Linksys now, issued a patch for a bunch of their routers for a couple of problems. Well, they found the problem exists on a couple more models, and they patched that. In particular, in this one, if anybody's ever run Apache before, they know about .ht password, which is you have a .ht access file. How you control with the login box that pops up, and you type in a username and password. Mm-hmm. There's a dot file that controls access to that. Right, it has the usernames and the hash password of each person that's going to try to log in. And by default, Apache has a rule in it that says don't allow anyone to download any file that starts with .ht to stop people from downloading HT access and HT password. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm guessing the Linksys routers use some other lighter HTTP daemon because Apache would eat up all of the 8 megs of RAM that are on it.
Right.
But they use the .ht access file, and they don't have the rule that stops people from reading it. So if you're on the LAN, you can just walk up to any Linksys that's affected by this flaw and get the .ht password file, which uses MD5, which is actually fairly easy to crack nowadays. So you can throw that at a brute force and get the password for the router.
Very good.
They also fixed the problem with there was some other service that's exposed to the internet side where someone could send a specially crafted message to it and cause it to expose data from the router.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's great.
Yep.
This next...
specifically, the Linksys is with the Smart Wi-Fi firmware. I've added the link. The link's in the show notes, but I've thrown it in the chat room because people were asking.
Smart Wi-Fi, though,
specifically, they mentioned the E4200 V2, EA4500, EA6200, 6300, 6400, 6500, 6700, and 6900. There are also public exploits for the EA3500 and EA6500 models since mid-September, and so on and so on. Depending on the JNAP action that is called, the attacker may be able to read or modify sensitive information on the router. The router exposes a number of ports by default on the wide area network, meaning the internet, including port 10080 and 52000, to expose the router's administrative interface. If the end user changes the default password, the JNAP issue I think is more serious due to the vast number of different pieces of information disclosed that the different JNAP protocols allow. Yeah, lots of crazy stuff.
I wonder how many of our audience still runs. You think the majority still run these Soho
off-the-shelf stuff?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, lots of people have switched to like a pfSense or something.
Yeah, I mean, but probably not the majority, right?
Yeah, not the majority, and a good number of people don't own the router. Like it's provided by the ISP, and they can't change it. Or, you know, when I was in college, it was owned by the landlord. You know, I actually kind of circumvented it a little bit to put my pfSense directly on the internet. But yeah, it was. So, you know, a lot of times people aren't in the position where they can replace it.
Right, that's very true. This next story in the roundup, it was recommended by the Mumble Room on Tech Talk today. They said, Chris, you got to talk about this in the TechSNAP roundup. The EFF went out and did sort of a scorecard of the different messaging solutions out there, you know, all the different kind of popular instant messaging platforms and products, whatever you want to call them. And they kind of they lined them all up. I'm looking at AOL Instant Messenger. It's atrocious. BlackBerry Messenger, also atrocious, but in protected mode, a little bit better. CryptoCat seems to fare not so bad. Facebook Chat, as you might expect, kind of atrocious. Same with Google Chat. Hushmail, not so hot. iMessage, pretty good for a mainline solution. A lot of different, so check out this EFF scorecard of how it works in terms of, they rated them on encrypted in transit, encrypted so the provider can't read it in the middle. If you can verify if that's truly the contact, verify their identity, and also if the code's been audited, if it's been designed securely, those kinds of things. They had a whole range of things. It's kind of a neat scorecard.
And does it support perfect forward secrecy so that if the encryption key is broken later on, or if you and somebody else are talking securely with encryption, and then the FBI raids the first person's house and gets their key, they can then decrypt the whole history. Whereas if it's using perfect forward secrecy, maybe they can't.
And here's PGP for Windows. That's kind of interesting. PGP for Mac. Silent text.
Viber didn't do so well.
No, Viber's got all kinds of problems. Viber's got problems that I think haven't got enough attention. Like, I think when you send pictures with Viber, they're publicly available. If you know the URL structure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they're based on a hash, so they're random, but yeah.
They're up like on a web server unencrypted, though. Like somebody did like a proof of concept thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but, you know, there's a lot of different apps for a lot of different purposes.
Although I was reading somewhere somebody had some issues with this particular...
Oh, really?
The scorecard.
Okay.
Now, those might have just been things that the EFF didn't consider, or the way they measured some of it. You know, but yes, it's still something to look at.
All right, Alan. Our next story on the roundup, get yourselves ready. Fire up your WSUS servers because Patch Tuesday is going to be a big one with 16 patches, right?
Yep. There's a roll-up for Internet Explorer, a bunch of patches critical for Windows to stop remote code execution. Exchange Server 2007, 2010, and 2013. And Office and a bunch of other stuff are all getting patches.
Yeah, of course they are.
I think even the Office read-only viewer tool that people can get for free has a security update. Because I have that because I use OpenOffice, but sometimes there's a certain docx file that won't read properly in OpenOffice. So I have the free Microsoft Reader app that lets me just view read-only the Word doc. And that'll get patched tomorrow. Or, sorry, next Tuesday.
All right, so this is a story. This is what the Roundup's great for. Sometimes stories that we don't have a lot of info yet, we just want to put them on the TechSNAP radar. This definitely, we might have more information next week, maybe we won't. But a Swedish hacker has found what he's calling a serious vulnerability in the latest version of OS X Yosemite. And this one appears to be something that might allow him to bypass like the traditional sort of security models where you can get root access. It's coming from TrueSec. We've talked about them before. He's calling this vulnerability root pipe. It's a privilege escalation vulnerability that gets him root access. It affects the latest version of 10.10, and also I guess it affects 10.8.5, but not 10.9. Not sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why. He says there's just been some changes. And so when they asked him, so why do you call it root pipe? He said, well, I would tell you why, except for it would kind of give away the vulnerability, so I can't say. So I guess the vulnerability is in the name, Alan, root pipe. And he says the way to get around this is just not use a user that has administrative level privileges on Mac OS X. So we'll hear more about it after Apple has a patch, because right now he's holding it. Normally, there's a pseudo-password requirements, which work as a barrier, so the admin can't gain root access without entering a password. However, root pipe circumvents this, according to the researcher. Wow.
Well, hopefully Apple fixes this soon and we can hear the details, because it sounds like it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it sounds like exactly. It sounds like it's a funny one, and I want to talk about it next week, so hopefully they get it quick. All right, next story in the roundup. American Express is bringing tokens to payments.
Yeah. So basically, it would replace your credit card with an electronic, kind of looks more like one of those RSA cards or whatever, and you would, instead of all the different places you use your credit card, having to store your credit card, they would each have a unique token.
Right.
And that way, it would be much easier to track down where these things came from, where the leaks are.
Yeah.
You wouldn't change your credit card number. You wouldn't have to change your credit card number when it did get stolen. It would just invalidate the one that, Home Depot had and not the one on file to pay your gas bill every month. And it would save you a lot of problems.
Yeah, in fact, some of the new NFC-based contactless payment systems are using essentially tokens, right, in the transmission at least. So
right.
The groundwork sounds like it's been laid.
If you're building a website, if you use something like Stripe, you never actually see the credit card number, right? The end user sends the credit card encrypted to Stripe, who then sends back to your website a token that you can use to reference that credit card number, but without ever having to see that credit card number.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So, Alan, I think that's the end of the roundup, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Wow. Well, welcome back, Alan. You're a trooper for being here. A little sick and a little jet-lagged, I'm sure.
Yes.
But we appreciate it nonetheless. And the TechSNAP train continues. If you'd like to get involved with the TechSNAP show, there's a couple of really great ways to do it. Number one, this is probably first and foremost the most rewarding, and that would be to join us live over at jblive.tv. We do this show live at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Yeah, and that's Pacific time, my time. But go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar to get that converted to your local time. That way you don't have to worry about the math. And
2100 UTC now, right?
Yeah.
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 Time change.
I know. That's why we have the calendar page. I know.
Yes.
It really and Alan, when you have kids, I'm not trying to project onto you, but if you ever have kids, they do not get daylight saving. It's the worst thing ever. The first couple of weeks, anyways, go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. We have robots on standby to do the time conversion for you, because daylight savings is literally the worst thing ever invented by the human race. Also, jblive.tv's got our embedded chat room, and once you go in there, you can do things like bang suggest a title or episode. You ever wonder where episode titles come from? We crowdsource those from our live stream. Last but not least, if you can't be here, this is like the number 2 way to participate. TechSNAP.reddit.com. Submit stories. Give us your comments for your insights. You guys are some of the smartest people on the internet. I really genuinely mean that, and I would love to get your insights. So techsnap.reddit.com is where you can go to share your opinions on the current events that are applicable to our show. Submit things that our community can interact on. We can feature in the feedback segment. techsnap.reddit.com. And last but not least, subscribe via RSS. That way you get the TechSNAP show every single stinking week. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.